Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. We're here for a live Q&A, inshallah ta'ala. As you know, Ramadan is just days away. So I wanted to take the time to really have an open Q&A for any questions that you may have that deals with the topic of Ramadan, preparing for Ramadan, or certain issues that may come up in Ramadan. And this Ramadan is, I don't want to say different, I'll say it's special because we have some unique circumstances dealing with the coronavirus and people being quarantined in their houses. So this year especially, I thought it would be particularly important to have an open Q&A like this. There were some questions submitted ahead of time, so I will begin with those questions, inshallah ta'ala. Also, if you do want to ask live questions, there's a chat here. I have my chat window open here on my computer, so I should be able to see that, inshallah ta'ala. So you can post your questions in the comments. My only request is make them relevant to the month of Ramadan, or anything related to the month of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. So as I said, I'm going to start off with some of the questions that were asked ahead of time. I have an email that I made specially for this Q&A, which is ramadanquestions@saadtasleem.com. So if you sent in questions to that, I have them here. So Bismillah, let me start with the first question. It says, as it is said to recite more Quran than usual during the month of Ramadan, my question is, should we focus only and just only on reciting the Quran, or should we study tafsir and do memorization of the Quran in Ramadan as well? Okay, this is an excellent question. The month of Ramadan, yes, it is known as the Shahr al-Quran, the month of the Quran, for the very reason that the Quran was revealed in Ramadan. Also, we know that the Prophet ﷺ would review the Quran with the angel Jibreel every Ramadan from beginning to end. And in the year that the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he reviewed the Quran twice. And so it has been the practice of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions after him to pay special attention to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan. Now, unfortunately, there are many people who have their relationship with the Quran is just memorizing the Quran. And sometimes this is more of a cultural issue where we're taught that the memorization of the Quran is the most important thing, or just the recitation. And if Arabic is not our native language and we may not understand Arabic, and sometimes, by the way, this is not just for people who are not Arab. Even Arabs sometimes, they may speak Arabic, but their dialect of Arabic can differ from classical Arabic or Fusha, what is known as the Arabic of the Quran. And so even somebody who is born into an Arab household and they speak Arabic, they may not have a great understanding of the meanings of the Quran. So sometimes, as I said, there's an emphasis on just reading the Quran or just memorizing the Quran. Now, when it comes to having a relationship with the Quran, and that's what our goal is, inshallah ta'ala, to have a relationship with the Quran. What does it mean to have a relationship with the Quran? I'm going to mention 5 or 6 things that we should try and focus on in the month of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. Number 1 is al-qira'ah, which is recitation. And that, I think most people, they do focus on that. We know that simply reciting the Quran, we are rewarded for it. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever recites a letter from the book of Allah will receive a good deed. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm not saying, he said that alif, lam, mim is not one letter, rather alif is a letter, mim is lam is a letter, and mim is a letter, meaning every single letter of the Quran that we recite, we receive reward for that. So the other extreme, by the way, is people who say like, don't recite the Quran, don't memorize the Quran, just look at the meanings of the Quran, which is the other extreme. And it should not be all or nothing. It shouldn't be just one or the other. And that's why I'm going to mention about 5 or 6 things here. But one of them, yes, just the recitation within of itself is important as well, even if we're not understanding anything. If we don't, understand a single word of what we're reciting, just the act of reciting the Quran, intrinsically, it has reward in it. So yes, that should be part of our relationship with the Quran. So that's number one, al-qira'ah. Number two, scholars, they say al-itqan, which is proficiency of the Quran, which is working on becoming proficient in the Quran. That is basically trying to better our recitation of the Quran and to try to better our pronunciation of the letters and the words and tajweed and all of that. That is what is known as itqan, or al-itqan, being proficient in the Quran. It doesn't mean you have to be proficient, but what it means is that you make an effort to be proficient in the Quran. And we know, as the Prophet told us, that a person who struggles with the recitation of the Quran, meaning a person who is not proficient with the Quran, a person who struggles, the Prophet told us that he has she has an added reward, meaning not only do they have the reward of reciting the Quran, but all the struggle that they go through, they're rewarded for that as well. So even if we're struggling with the Quran, we are rewarded for that very struggle, even if we're not proficient, but working towards proficiency in reciting the Quran. Number three, so we said al-qira'ah, al-itqan, and number three is khushu'. Khushu' is really presence of the heart, or we can say presence of the heart and the mind, right? So we don't want to have a relationship with the Quran where our hearts and minds are not present, because really part of the Quran and the reason why the Quran was sent, yes, it was sent for recitation, but also it was sent for us to learn and understand the meanings of the Quran. And khushu' can only be developed when we learn and understand the meanings of the Quran, which is what I will get to, inshallah ta'ala. So khushu', developing the presence of our heart, the presence of our mind when reciting the Quran. Number four, al-tadabbur, which is basically contemplation of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, that do they not ponder or do they not reflect upon the Quran, أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا, or are there locks upon their hearts? And here, this is a question by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to wake us up, to help us understand that if we're not contemplating the Quran, that if we're not reflecting upon the Quran, then we're not truly benefiting, we're not properly benefiting from the Quran. So part of having a relationship with the Quran is being able to, or is reflecting upon the Quran. And a prerequisite for that is obviously what I said earlier, al-fahm, which is understanding the Quran. So working towards understanding the Quran. How do we understand the Quran? Well, for some of us, that means looking up the meanings of the Quran and looking up the tafsir of the Quran to properly understand the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving to us. That's how we will develop khushu', what I spoke about earlier. And also that is what will lead to this point number four, of tadabbur al-Quran, which is reflecting upon the Quran. We don't want that our hearts be like they are locked up, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, are there locks upon the heart? Meaning the Quran needs to penetrate our hearts. And how will it penetrate the Quran if we do not reflect upon the Quran? Now, a lot of times people ask me, how do you reflect upon the Quran? What does it mean? Or some people will say, look, I'm not a scholar, I cannot do tafsir of the Quran. I have to be very clear here. There is a very big difference. There's a clear difference between tafsir and tadabbur. No one is asking you to do tafsir, nor should you be doing tafsir. Tafsir should be done by those people who are qualified, those people who are educated in the deen and who are educated in the Quran to do tafsir. Tafsir goes into things like, what is Allah saying here? Why did Allah say it? What circumstances did Allah mention this ayah in? All of that comes under tafsir, and that comes with knowledge. Tadabbur happens after the knowledge, meaning once we understand, once the tafsir is done, we understand what Allah is saying, then we can do tadabbur. So tadabbur is different, is separate than tafsir. No one is asking you to do tafsir. Go look up the tafsir. Go look up the interpretation and the meanings and the message of the Quran. Do that, leave that to the scholars. But look it up. Once you know the meaning of the Quran, do tadabbur. Tadabbur is taking the meanings of the Quran and asking yourself, How does this relate to my life? How does this affect my life? What role does it play in my life? So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, that with hardship comes ease. Okay, so we have the qira'ah of it. We recite it. We want to make sure we recite it in the best possible way. We want to develop khushu' and tadabbur. We want to reflect upon the Quran. We have to first understand what it means. So when Allah says, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, that with hardship comes ease, that means, and this can go into the meaning in the tafsir of the Quran, that when Allah gives hardship, Allah also gives ease with it. That is the tafsir, that is the understanding. Also, part of the tafsir is that when Allah brings hardship, that always attached to that hardship is ease, meaning ease is connected to it. Ma'a, Allah said with, inna, certainly, ma'al usri yusra, with the hardship is the ease, meaning they're not separate, they'll be connected. After a hardship, there comes ease, either in this life or in the afterlife. So that is, now we have understood the Quran, we know the meanings of the Quran, we've recited the Quran. Tadabbur means we say, in my life, now that I understand that verse, in my life, how does this apply? Well, I'm going through this difficulty and that difficulty and this hardship. Tadabbur of the Quran means I say, okay, so how do I apply this to my life? Well, this gives me solace, it gives me comfort, because as difficult as things are right now, there is ease that is attached to it, meaning relief is going to come. Maybe not in this life, but maybe in the afterlife. Also, part of the tafsir of this ayah, which I forgot to mention, is that the yusr that Allah has mentioned, part of that yusr is a reward, right? The reward we get for going through a hardship and being patient. So, once again, tadabbur means, okay, I'm going through this hardship, whatever that particular hardship is to you, and you say, I know this is hard, but I know that if I'm patient with this hardship, then certainly there's yusr with it. Part of that yusr is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward me for that ease that I am going through. And so that is what we're talking about when we say tadabbur al-Quran, reflecting upon the Quran. Number 5, hifdh al-Quran, memorization of the Quran. And yes, that is part of it as well. We should make an effort in the month of Ramadan, as we're making the effort to recite and to reflect upon the Quran. We should make an effort to memorize the Quran as well. This doesn't mean you have to memorize 10 surahs of the Quran, or or 2 juz of the Quran, or 3 juz. That's not what we're saying here. But what I'm saying is that you should make an effort to memorize something of the Quran, even if it is 1 ayah, even if it is small ayat of the Quran, but regularly memorizing and making a schedule for ourselves that we will add to our memorization of the Quran. And if we memorize the Quran, obviously the Hufad know this, that for them a lot of times it's review of the Quran, right? Review and strengthening of what they have memorized. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, certainly the one who doesn't have anything of the Quran in their heart is like an abandoned house, or a ruined house. Meaning we all want something of the Quran. It doesn't mean you have to be a hafiz of the Quran, but what it means is that we should be making an effort to memorize something of the Quran, even if it's something very little or very small. So we said al-hifdh al-Quran, hifdh al-Quran. Number 6, and this is the last point I'll mention, is al-amal wa-tatbiq. This is acting and implementing the Quran into our lives. So this is part of reflecting upon the Quran, as I mentioned earlier, but this is now the practical aspect of living with the Quran. Meaning we take the message of the Quran and we apply it into our lives. And that was the methodology, that was the way of the companions. One of my favorite narrations that I mentioned a lot, subhanAllah, is the narration of Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, who said, it took me 4 years to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah. And I often compare this to the Huffaz that we have today. Surah Al-Baqarah, some of you may know this, but it's about 2.5 juz of the Quran. For somebody who is memorizing the Quran, to memorize 2.5 juz, for somebody who's like really good at memorizing, they could do it very quickly. There's people who memorize the whole Quran in 2 years, right? But in the whole Quran in 2 years, there are Huffaz that will, and even less. I've heard of Huffaz who have memorized the whole Quran in less than 2 years. Ibn Umar, who was a Sahabi, he was a knowledgeable Sahabi, he was a scholar amongst the Sahaba, he had a very high rank. He said, it took me 4 years to memorize just 2.5 juz of the 30 juz of the Quran. Why? He said, because I would never pass a single verse of Surah Al-Baqarah except that I would implement it into my life. Subhanallah. This is why it took him so long. He said, I'm not going to move on. I'm not going to memorize another ayah until I've implemented. I can test it on the Day of Judgment. I can come and say, oh Allah, I heard the message and I applied it in my life. And because of that, he said it took me 4 years to memorize Surah Al-Baqarah. And that's why I don't believe we should be in a hurry, especially as adults. Children, it's another matter, right? Children, we should encourage them to memorize as much as possible, obviously to the best of their ability, and we don't want to pressure them. But children, is a different issue. But as adults, I don't believe we should be in a hurry just to memorize the Quran if we're not benefiting from the message of the Quran, if we're not doing tatbiq, if we're not implementing the message of the Quran. Yes, we should memorize, as I said, but part of that memorization should be implementation of the Quran. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, once again, famous companion, he said, it was difficult for me to memorize the Quran, but it was easy for me to act upon the Quran. And subhanAllah, in our times, it is the opposite, right? We find it easy to memorize the Quran, but difficult to act upon it, right? But we want to go back to the way of the companions and their relationship with the Quran. So to review, if you didn't catch all of them, we said number 1, al-qira'ah, recitation of the Quran. Number 2, itqan, to work to be proficient in our recitation of the Quran. Khushu', developing the presence of heart and presence of mind with the Quran. We said that happens when we learn and understand the meanings of the Quran, when we look up the tafsir of the Quran, which is definitely a part of what we should be doing. Tadabbur, we said number 4, tadabbur, reflecting upon the Quran. Number 5, hifz al-Quran, memorizing the Quran. And lastly, which is not a last point, but this is not in order of importance. This is all together. We should be doing all of this. Is tatbiq, is implementation of the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Sorry for a long answer to that question. It's just that that question is an excellent question because it is very relevant to the month of Ramadan. And alhamdulillah, we know that in the month of Ramadan, it may become easier for us to work towards bettering our relationship with Allah. And so this is an excellent time to build a relationship with the Quran that will hopefully continue with us even after the month of Ramadan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions in the chat. As I said, you can post your questions in the chat, and I'll try my best to answer them, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so someone said, Bismillah. Someone said, I didn't have my exams yet, but I want to complete the Quran. The routine is too tough. What should I do? I think I covered this in the previous answer. Yes, we should make an effort to complete the Quran, but that shouldn't be our only goal during the month of Ramadan. We should have other goals as well. We should, however, work to have a relationship with the Quran, which involves all of the 4 to 6 things that I've mentioned previously. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, someone says, does tahajjud require sleep? Tahajjud is the prayer also known as qiyam or qiyamul layl, normally prayed in the last third of the night. Tahajjud prayer does not require sleep. So even if we haven't slept, we are still allowed to pray tahajjud. Our scholars do mention that if a person does sleep, then they may be more refreshed, and they may be better, and they may be more capable of praying tahajjud. But I know, subhanAllah, some people are the opposite, that once they fall asleep, especially in Ramadan, where people may be staying up the night, that once they fall asleep, it's hard for them to get up for tahajjud. So no, it's not a requirement. If a person doesn't sleep during the night, maybe they're busy doing other acts of worship, husnul dhan, right? I'm not assuming the worst, I'm assuming the best. They're doing other acts of worship and they're up at night. And they can definitely, when the last third of the night comes, pray the tahajjud prayer, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, someone said, Assalamu alaikum from Madagascar. I embraced Islam on January 2nd, 2020. And this is my first Ramadan. Alhamdulillah wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the brotherhood and sisterhood. Welcome to the faith, alhamdulillah. Any tips by any chance? So, yeah, I have lots of tips, but one of the things that I'll mention is I recorded, I think last year or the year before, a whole series on preparing for the month of Ramadan. I think they're about 5 or 6 short videos that I go through some of the ways of taking advantage of the month of Ramadan and all the fiqh issues related to the month of Ramadan. And I'll post a link to it, inshallah, at the end of this session, inshallah ta'ala. Or I'll post it in the link to this video when it is uploaded, the live video when it's uploaded. But definitely check that out, especially if you're new to Islam. And as I said, welcome to Islam. Tips for lazy people to not stay up all night and sleep all day and wake up a little bit before iftar. Look, what I'm about to say may seem a little bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it needs to be said and it needs to be heard. Staying up the whole night is not within of itself a bad thing. Like, just because somebody stays up the whole night doesn't mean it's a bad thing, as long as they're taking advantage of that night. Look, the reality is not everyone has the luxury to stay up the whole night. People who are working, people who have jobs, people who go to school, and I know now with the coronavirus, everybody's home, so this may be an opportunity that many of us are getting for the first time in years. But outside of this time, outside of the coronavirus issue, people don't have the luxury to stay up the whole night. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you that ability, then take advantage of it, right? So as long as we're using the night to be productive, we're using the night to worship Allah, we're using the night to increase ourselves in knowledge, we're using the night to better ourselves, all of that would be good reasons to stay up the night. And yes, if you're staying up the night, subhanAllah, then you need to sleep at some point, right? And that's why I never understood people who shame other people for sleeping during the day in the month of Ramadan. Yes, if the person is sleeping during the day and they're missing their prayers and they're missing their other obligations and it's just causing laziness, yeah, of course, that's not good. But if a person is sleeping during the day because they stayed up the whole night worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's amazing, right? Alhamdulillah, you have that ability to do that. And I know a lot of people, subhanAllah, that will who are able to stay up during the night. They stay up during the night. They'll take care of themselves. They'll be productive at night. They'll recite Quran during the night. They will pray tahajjud. They'll make sure they pray tahajjud. They'll pray tahajjud. They will recite Quran. They will do other things. They'll make sure to eat suhoor, right? Which is very important, subhanAllah. Prophet said, "Tasahharu fa inna fi suhoori barakah." He said, eat suhoor, right? Because in the suhoor there is barakah. Some people who, because they may be tired or whatever, they are unable to eat suhoor, or they only wake up like 2 minutes before fajr and they only eat a couple bites of suhoor, and maybe they're missing out on that barakah, right? But someone who stays up the whole night, they have the ability now to eat suhoor. They get the barakah of the suhoor. Pray fajr on time. They can pray the sunnah of fajr. They can pray fajr on time, and they may stay up for the duha prayer, and then they go to sleep, right? So they took advantage of the whole night, and then they sleep from fajr time until dhuhr time. And alhamdulillah, they make up on their sleep. That's not something that they should be shamed for, right? Because they're taking advantage of the time during the night. So just sleeping the night within of itself is not a bad thing, as long as we're, staying up during the night and sleeping during the day is not necessarily a bad thing. And I know a lot of times it's culture, right? Because culturally we see somebody sleeping during the day, we're like, oh, look at this person, right? So lazy, or this or that, whatever. But that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, some people that may be the case. They're staying up all night, just wasting their time, doing whatever, and during the day they're sleeping all day and they're not getting anything out of the month of Ramadan. Yeah, that's not good. But my advice is, look, if Allah has given you that ability and you find yourself being productive at night and you find yourself worshiping Allah at night, then take advantage of it. Make sure that time is not going to waste, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay. Someone said, okay, let me see some other questions. Is it better for one to do one khatam or memorize the whole Surah Al-Baqarah? Okay, so once again, this question goes back to the first question, and that is that it shouldn't be one or the other. We should try to be balanced in the month of Ramadan in our relationship with the Quran. It should involve reciting the Quran, and it should involve memorization as well. That being said, I will say also that we should also look at our own aptitude, our own strengths. So someone may have the aptitude for one particular aspect more than the other. So maybe someone finds it easier, or they're more or they're better at studying the Quran rather than memorizing the Quran. And if that is your strength, you can focus on that strength, as long as the other aspects of the Quran are not completely neglected. But if you find a strength for something, then yes, we should. And this is not a requirement. It's not like we are sinful if we don't do khatam of the Quran or if we don't memorize the Quran. These are all things that are considered mustahab, things that are recommended, things that are good. So when it comes to the mustahab matters, we should pick those in general, we should pick those things that play to our strengths. So if you find that, subhanAllah, you have a much easier time memorizing in the month of Ramadan, more so than outside of the month of Ramadan, and you find yourself enjoying the memorization, you have an aptitude for it, then I would definitely encourage you to play to your strengths. Right? If that's the case for you, then play to your strengths. And as I said, we're all different. We all have different strengths and different weaknesses. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His wisdom, has made our worship of so many different types. Some acts of worship are, they require physical exertion, right? Qiyamul layl, the salah, fasting, it's a physical act of worship. Some acts of worship are more monetary, right? Giving sadaqah, giving charity. Not everyone has the aptitude. Not everyone has the wealth to give charity like other people. Some acts of worship are monetary and they are physical. For example, making hajj, right? It requires money and also requires physical effort. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made our acts of worship varied, right, in different types, so that we can all play to our strengths. And apart from the fara'id, apart from those acts of worship that are a requirement, with the requirements, we don't say I'm going to pick one over the other, right? So we don't say, oh, I'm going to fast and I'm not going to pray my fard prayers. No, the fard is the fard, we all have to do it. But other than the fard, other than the obligatory acts of worship, the recommended, the mustahab, the sunnah, the nawafil, all the extra acts of worship, yes, it is beneficial to play to our strengths. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, I'm going to take another question from one of the questions that was sent in to the email. Someone said, as some of us have no hifz of the Quran, no memorization of the Quran, in the house, so we can lead taraweeh prayer in the house. So can one lead taraweeh prayer in the house by reciting using the mushaf, using the physical copy of the Quran? And can one use a mobile device instead of the mushaf? Okay, so this is an issue you'll find some debate amongst the scholars regarding is it permissible to hold the copy of the Quran during the prayer. The majority of the madhahib, the schools of thought, they allow for this. The Shafi'is, the Hanbalis, I know, allow for this. And I also know that the Hanafi madhab, in particular Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, was of the view that it is not permissible. It is not permissible to hold a copy of the Quran during the prayer. So before I get into the stronger opinion, if you are Hanafi, you follow a Hanafi scholar, you have a Hanafi imam, and your scholar told you that you shouldn't do it, then go with that opinion. However, if you don't have someone that you can go to and you rely upon for these issues, then I will give you my opinion. My opinion is with the majority. I follow the opinion of the majority that it is permissible. It is permissible to hold the mushaf, a copy of the Quran, especially during those prayers are not obligatory. I know Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, the Hanbali madhab, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is of the opinion that it is makruh, it is disliked to hold the mushaf in the obligatory prayers, in the fard prayers, but in the sunnah nawafil prayers, it is permissible. And that is also only in the case, it is only makruh in the case that a person is able to recite from their memory. And so Imam Ahmad, he's of the opinion that if you are unable to recite the Quran, then even in the fard prayers, it is not makruh, meaning it's completely permissible even in the obligatory prayers. But the point being, as I said, the majority are of the opinion that it is permissible to hold a copy of the Quran. And look, there's reasons why the scholars differed on it, and I'll touch upon it a little bit. But some of the Hanafi scholars, they said that holding a copy of the Quran distracts us from the way the prayer should be prayed. So the Prophet didn't teach us to pray the prayer while our hands would be up, physically holding something. The Prophet said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli," pray as you see me praying, meaning we cannot make up our own actions in the prayer, right? So we cannot do things that the Prophet didn't teach us to do in the prayer. And this is one of the reasons that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala didn't allow for people to hold hold a copy of the Quran in the prayer. Other scholars have said that following the Prophet in our prayer deals with the actions of the prayer. But if there's something that is a slight departure from the prayer in our actions, then it doesn't affect the prayer itself. And their evidence for that is the fact that the Prophet would do certain things while he was praying. So, for example, we have an authentic narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet held a child during the prayer. So he lifted up the child, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the daughter of Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, if I'm not mistaken on that. But the Prophet ﷺ held a child during the prayer, and that did not affect the prayer also. Also, we do have an authentic narration where someone was knocking on the door of the Prophet ﷺ's apartment, his living quarters, and during the prayer, the Prophet reached over and he opened the door without moving the direction of the prayer, or without changing, as I said, without changing the direction of the prayer or doing anything else. So the other scholars, the Hanbali scholars and the Shafi'is, for example, they say if it's a small movement which doesn't take away from the prayer, then that does not affect the prayer. So they say, this is something which is permissible, and especially if there's a need for it. And I know now, especially now more than ever, when we are not going to the masjid to pray taraweeh, definitely this would fall under the need to hold a copy of the Quran. And regarding the second issue, holding a mobile device or holding a cell phone, this would come under the same thing as holding a copy of the Quran. So that would be permissible as well, especially for those who don't have anything memorized from the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, so let me take some questions from the chat. Okay, so I'm going to try and stick to those questions that are relevant to Ramadan. Let's see, Bismillah. Let's see. There's quite a few questions here. Bismillah. So similar, somebody asked, are we allowed to use a written copy of the Quran during the prayer? Yes, so I said, it is my opinion that is permissible to do, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. What is the best organization to give zakah? I don't know. It depends on where you live. It depends on what you have access to. So this may differ from place to place, so I don't want to give a general answer. I know people are viewing from all over the world. Alhamdulillah, we have people joining us from all over the world, and this will be up on my YouTube channel after we're done as well. So I know people listen to this from all over the world, so I don't want to, I don't want to give an answer regarding this. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Bismillah. Someone said, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh, what is the best time to pay fidya? The beginning, middle, during the end? So look, this depends on what reason somebody is giving fidya for, what reason someone is giving the expiation for. If somebody is giving it, for example, for an illness, that an ongoing illness or a long-term illness, that meaning they're not able to fast for an illness that's not going to get better, and it's not like they can make up their prayer later on. Then something like that, look, your fidya is due upon not fasting. So some of our scholars have said that if you know you're not going to fast the month of Ramadan, then get out of that obligation ahead of time and go ahead and feed a poor person for every day of the fast that you did not do. But in terms of an obligation, that obligation only is upon us once the time comes. So let's say somebody, subhanAllah, passes away after the 15th fast of the month of Ramadan. If they pass away and they've only fed 15 people, then they are only responsible for those 15 fasts because they are not alive for the rest of the 15 fasts. They're not going to be held accountable for those fasts that they were not alive for. So that is in terms of an obligation. But in terms of if somebody wants to make it easy upon themselves and they want to do it ahead of time, that would be fine, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Someone said, if you're pregnant, please guide on any other obligation other than paying fidya. Do these missed fasts have to be made up afterwards? Okay, so for someone who is pregnant, and for those who are pregnant and those who are breastfeeding, feeding their infant children, then if it is a fasting would be very difficult for them, or it would harm the child in any way, or it would affect the pregnancy and have any type of negative effect on the pregnancy in any way, right? So if you go to your doctor and doctor says, look, do not fast for this period of time, it could affect your health or it could affect the baby's health, then definitely this person is allowed to not fast during that time, right? In the month of Ramadan. Now, do they have to make up the fast? Yes, they have to make up the fast. That fast is something that is still an obligation upon them. So when they are able to, when they're capable to, they do have to make up that fast. Now, do they have to pay fidya along with that? I'm of the opinion that the safer opinion is to give fidya, even though I don't view it to be a requirement for pregnant women. But I do recommend to err on the side of caution if one has the ability, if one has the financial means to give the fidya, to feed a poor person for the fast that they missed. And mind you, we're talking about pregnant and breastfeeding women here, that the fidya should be given as well. And yes, as I said, the fasts do have to be made up. Now, I know one of the concerns that often comes is sisters will say, look, I didn't fast this last month of Ramadan because I was pregnant and I have 30 fasts to make up. How am I going to make up 30 fasts? You try your best. You try your best to make up those 30 fasts. And I've heard of cases where a woman says, I was pregnant one Ramadan, the next Ramadan I was breastfeeding, and the next Ramadan I got pregnant again, and then the next Ramadan I was breastfeeding, and then the next Ramadan I got pregnant again. Now it's been like 4 or 5 subhanAllah Ramadans, and I have not fasted. How am I going to make up, I don't know, like 120 fasts? Try your best. Try to do as much as you can, inshallah ta'ala. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be conscious of Allah. Have the taqwa of Allah to the best of your ability. Obviously, Allah knows everyone's ability or their capability, and Allah will not oppress anyone. Allah is the most just. When we come on the Day of Judgment, Allah knows our particular circumstances and our situations. If someone had a difficulty where they were not able to make up the fast, then that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. No one will be punished unjustly in the hereafter. So, but it is from our side, we try our best to make up as many fasts as we can, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay. Someone said, is it okay to recite the Quran with correct pronunciation? I'm Arab, but without tajweed. I don't know how to recite beautifully with tajweed, but I'm memorizing the Quran. Okay, so look, there is some difference of opinion on the matter of tajweed, right? Is tajweed a requirement or not? However, the stronger opinion seems to be that as long as the pronunciation of the words, of the letters, I used to say letters, right? The makharij, which is the pronunciation of the letters, and the pronunciation of the words is correct. And when we say letters, we say, can you say the qaf properly? Can you say the ayn properly? So on and so forth. Because an incorrect pronunciation of a letter can change the meaning of the word, right? So classic example, what is the difference between qalb and kalb? Qalb and kalb, and the Arabs know this. Qalb is your heart, kalb is a dog, right? Qaf and kaf, there's just the different pronunciation, right? Someone pronounces the qaf incorrectly. Instead of saying heart, they can end up saying dog, right? So that is a requirement. We should, and as I said, we work towards this. We try to better ourselves. and especially those learning the Quran, you're not expected to be perfect, but we should learn the correct pronunciation of the letters and also correct pronunciation of the words. What I mean by that is the harakat, or the vowels of the word. So changing a fatha to a kasra, a dhamma, so on and so forth. The vowels can change the meaning of the word as well. So as long as the person is pronouncing the letters and the words of the Quran properly, then that is acceptable, inshallah ta'ala, and tajweed would not be a requirement. That being said, I will say that I do highly recommend that a person studies tajweed, because one of the benefits and the blessings of tajweed is that it helps us memorize the Quran. And the Prophet instructed us to beautify the Quran, to beautify our pronunciation of the Quran. Obviously, we all have different abilities. Some of us may have a better voice, not a better voice, and some scholars, those scholars, by the way, who view tajweed to be a requirement, they say, look, Prophet said beautify the Quran. Tajweed is the beautification of the Quran, meaning that is something which is a requirement. So that's their opinion. However, as I said, at the very least, I don't think we should neglect tajweed. I highly encourage people to learn and study tajweed, because that will help, it will aid in our memorization of the Quran. And I can give you an example, a personal example. My son, Allah yahfadhu, may Allah protect him and all of our children. He's 5 years old, and I'm encouraging him to memorize the Quran. And I've always seen that when I have him recite the Quran with tajweed, and that we make the Quran melodious, right? We beautify the Quran. It is easier for him to memorize the Quran, as opposed to when I just recite it, not with tajweed, but without making it, without beautifying it, because melody, subhanAllah, is something naturally pleasing to our nafs, right? So when we hear something melodious, when we hear something beautified, it is naturally it is pleasing to the nafs, it is pleasing to the soul, and that definitely aids us, as I said, with the Quran, in memorization of the Quran. Definitely for my son, it makes a big difference if we're not reciting the Quran with tajweed. Like, he can tell the difference. So that's why, like I said, it's one of many reasons there is barakah in learning the Quran with tajweed. So I would definitely recommend. And subhanAllah, tajweed, if a person works at it, especially if a person has correct makharij, meaning their pronunciation of the Quran is good, as the questioner said, I can pronounce Arabic fine. If the pronunciation of the letters and pronunciation of the words is correct, then tajweed, inshallah ta'ala, will not be that difficult. Learning the tajweed, inshallah ta'ala, will not be that difficult. I don't see it taking very long, inshallah ta'ala, as long as the pronunciation of the letters and you already have that, alhamdulillah. I don't think tajweed would take too much time. So I would recommend definitely that the person learns tajweed, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, someone is saying, I am to learn Arabic during the quarantine, but I don't know how to start. Okay, so I get this question a lot, like, how do I learn Arabic? Where can I learn Arabic? And I always have difficulty answering this question because I'm not fully in tune with what is out there in terms of Arabic programs online. I learned Arabic, or I should say, the bulk of my Arabic I learned a very long time ago. And for myself, there used to be an institute here locally, actually not that local, it was in the next state over, it was in Virginia, which I attended, where I started learning Arabic there. I spent some time in Egypt as well. I spent one summer in college. I went to Egypt. I studied Arabic there. And then, as many of you know, after I was accepted to the University of Medina, I did the 2-year diploma in Arabic, and I learned Arabic there as well. And I still continue to learn Arabic. I don't think that somebody just completes Arabic, right? Arabic is something that we can learn our whole lifetime. So I still consider myself as a student of Arabic, because Arabic, alhamdulillah, is one of those things you can continue to learn your whole life. But that was my journey, and things now, and I learned Arabic, that journey of mine was a long time ago. I don't know what's out there now. Now there's a lot of programs online. There are, institutes and so on and so forth. So I'm not the best person to ask this question, so I would yes, I would defer this question to someone else. Maybe some of the people here in the chat can recommend something as well. Also, in the comments for this video, if you go check out this video later, if you're not watching it live, then you can inshallah ta'ala, you can add to the comments, inshallah ta'ala, if you could recommend, do a service for anyone listening, if you know of any institutes or any places where a person can go study the Quran online, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, bismillah. So I'm going to take a couple more questions. I didn't want this to go beyond an hour. So we're about 45 minutes in right now, and I'm going to stop before we hit an hour, inshallah ta'ala. So I'm going to take a couple more questions, inshallah. Okay. Someone is saying, what is the best time to make dua while fasting, right before breaking the fast or right after breaking the fast? The answer to that is all of those times. All of those times we should be making dua. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. He said, dua is worship. And what he's saying here is that dua is really the essence of worship. Meaning dua is one of the best ways to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So during the month of Ramadan, especially when we're fasting, we know the Prophet ﷺ informed us that the dua of a fasting person is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all throughout the day, we should be making dua while we are fasting, right before breaking the fast, after the breaking of fast, all of those times. And I understand, subhanAllah, people, you may get the impression that it's just one answer to this question. And I see this happen a lot, subhanAllah. People think it's one or the other with a lot of these issues. But the reality is that it doesn't have to be one or the other. So my recommendation is to make dua at any point. And especially, I would say, look, the best time to make dua is when your heart is most present in that dua, right? And that is the most important aspect of our dua, is that our heart is present while making that dua. And so for someone right after breaking their fast, they may be overwhelmed with emotion, and that is the best time for them, meaning the khushu' is there, and that, so I would say definitely make dua during it. For some people, right before breaking the fast, and that's a time where, once again, they're really feeling the fast and their spirituality is heightened, definitely make dua at that time as well. And likewise, even, during the night or the evening when we are not fasting, that people may have more strength to make dua at that time. We know, yes, specific times, the last third of the night is a time where our dua is more accepted. And as I said, the dua of the fasting person and so on and so forth, those are all there. But we should try our best, inshallah ta'ala, to vary the times when we are making dua. And also, as I said, most importantly, pick the time that is best for your heart, where your heart is most present in making the dua. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, next question. Someone said, can women recite the Quran during their menses for the purpose of memorization if they read from a laptop? So reading from a laptop, reading from a laptop or a tablet or a phone does not take the ruling of reading from the actual mushaf, holding a physical copy of the Quran. So that would be fine, inshallah ta'ala. Yes, so as long as it's not, as we said, a physical, because regarding the physical copy of the Quran, there's a difference of opinion on that, but the majority of scholars, they say that during a woman during her menses, during her menstrual cycle, should not hold a physical copy of the Quran. As I said, there's khilaf on that issue. I don't really want to get into that, but alhamdulillah, a very simple way to get out of that khilaf, to get out of that difference of opinion, and to take the safer option here, use a tablet if you're able to do that, or your phone, or something like that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay. Bismillah. Someone said, I've heard Epic Masjid on YouTube has a few beginner level tajweed Arabic course. Okay, very good. Okay, so that's a recommendation for an Arabic program. Okay, I'm sure there's many, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so one final question I'm going to take from the questions that were asked online. The questions that were asked online, sorry, on through the email. let me take one of those questions, because I do want to give time to the people who email their questions ahead of time as well. And I'll be doing, by the way, another Q&A somewhere maybe in the 10-day mark or the halfway mark during Ramadan. And I usually also do a Q&A before the last 10 days. So keep an eye out, inshallah ta'ala. I know, issues develop, and there may be different concerns that we have before Ramadan versus the middle of Ramadan versus maybe the end of Ramadan. So I'll do another Q&A, inshallah ta'ala. If you do have questions, you can email them to and I'll post that in the comments, inshallah ta'ala. But you can you can email your questions to ramadanquestions@saidtaslim.com. But let me take one of these questions that have been asked through the email. Someone said, can you follow the taraweeh online if you are quarantined at home? Okay, so this is a question that has come up quite a bit, because, and this question, by the way, is not a new issue, by the way, relatively. This is not a new issue, because since the advent of TV, right? Since the very first time that the Taraweeh prayer from Masjid al-Haram in Mecca was broadcast to the world, right? Since that time, people have been asking this question, and I want you to imagine, subhanAllah, seeing this technology for the first time. You're sitting in your home, thousands of miles away, and then you turn on your TV and you can watch the Taraweeh, subhanAllah, in Mecca, right? So the natural question is, can I follow that Taraweeh? Because the recitation is amazing, it's in Mecca, so on and so forth. Can I follow that? Can I just pray at home? Make my own salah, but I'm following what I see on TV. So this is a relatively since then, this question has been asked, and also, subhanAllah, even before the advent of TV, there was people who would say, if we can hear the masjid from our house, right? So this is before even TV, radio, even, subhanAllah, before the time of microphones. There may be somebody who says, look, I live, fairly close to the masjid, right? Maybe it's half a mile or a quarter of a mile or something like that. And from my house, I can hear the imam reciting, right? Even, let's say, without a microphone, but I can hear them. Can I pray in my house? So this is not a new issue, subhanAllah. Yes, this issue has popped up now, especially because the vast majority of us, right, are not going to the masjid. Masjid may not be holding Taraweeh. We are quarantined. Alhamdulillah, we're quarantined because we don't want to be a reason that this virus spreads even more. And as a side note, we do have a responsibility as believers to make sure that we are not harming other people and not increasing in this problem. That we do not, as Prophet said, la darara wa la dirar, there's no causing of harm, nor is there reciprocating of harm. We should not be the source of harm for anyone. So we have a religious obligation to make sure that we are quarantined, that make sure we're not going in large gatherings and we're not making this worse. Even if, subhanAllah, I know some people, especially some young people, they say, like, I'm not afraid of the coronavirus. I'm young, and most of the young people get the coronavirus, they recover. And by the way, some young people have died from the coronavirus as well. Young people, completely healthy. So just because you're young doesn't mean may Allah protect us, right? But doesn't mean that you're completely safe. But a person may say, I'm safe, nothing's gonna happen to me, I'll be fine. It's not just about you. It's about, if you get infected and you'll be fine, but how about the elderly that you are affecting? And subhanAllah, the harm that you may be causing to them. Have no doubt that if you did that out of negligence, that this is something that, subhanAllah, Allah will hold us accountable for. If we were negligent, if we were careless, we didn't care, and we didn't think about other people, how we could be harming other people, this is without a doubt, this could be considered a dhulm, it can be considered oppression, it can be considered harming other people, right? And we know, subhanAllah, how serious that is in Islam. Anyway, that's a side point. But as I said, hopefully, and I know every masjid may be different. Maybe where you live, they may be holding Taraweeh prayer in a way that people are, 6 feet apart or something like that. And I know some of the latest studies are saying that even 13 feet away, subhanAllah, people can catch the coronavirus. I don't know. I'm not a professional, but the last thing I heard confirmed was that, 6 feet apart or whatever maybe. So maybe a masjid is holding that type of Taraweeh. That's a separate matter. And that's for them to decide. It's not, my local masjid, no, we're not having Taraweeh, alhamdulillah, because as I said, I think that is the correct decision for my masjid, my local community here. I don't want to speak for other communities. They have to, that's between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the knowledge that they have. But at least here in my local communities here, we're not holding taraweeh for for people to gather. And so because of that, right? Because of the coronavirus, because of being quarantined, this issue has now popped up again. And I wanted to give you that background of this not being a new issue, because I've heard some people saying, oh, this is from the nawazil, meaning this is a new issue, right? And that's why the modern day scholars have to decide, and whatever, you could take the opinion of a modern day scholar, and so it's a difference, it's a big difference of opinion or whatever. Look, as I said, this is not a new issue. It's been this question has been asked for a long time. And so there is khilaf, there is difference of opinion on this issue, but the vast majority of the scholars are of the opinion that it is not permissible to be at home and following a jama'ah somewhere else, right? There's a few different issues. Number one, there's the issue of being in two different places, right? And this is an old issue. Can you pray with someone if you're in two different places? The Hanafis, the Hanbalis, they say this is not if it's they mention like a short distance, the distance of like a road crossing, and something small. If it's more than that distance, no, you cannot pray in that way. The Shafi'i madhab gives a certain amount of distance as well. The Malikis may have certain allowance for that, but the majority says no. If you're in different places, no, that is not permissible. The other issue is praying by yourself, right? We know the issue, the Prophet ﷺ has told us that we should not, if there's a jama'ah, we should not be praying by ourselves, right? So basically start our own row by ourselves, and there's nobody in it. We make our own row. This is like the issue of you go to the masjid, instead of joining the row in front of you, you go and make your own row in the back. Yeah, and it's just you by yourself, and you're praying with the jama'ah. Many of our scholars say that is not okay, right? The Hanafi madhab in particular, they say this is only permissible in the Kaaba, when you're praying in Masjid al-Haram, where and that's basically out of necessity. And even I believe some of the other madhab, they say only out of necessity it may be okay, right? Meaning, let's say the row in front of you, there's no room there, right? And now you come by yourself and there's nobody with you, khalas, then you have to pray in your own row, right? That's a necessity. Or as we said in Mecca or Medina, where, and especially Mecca, subhanAllah, sometimes the rows go all the way out to the marketplace and you're praying on the street, and it's hard to, there may not be clear rows for you to join. Okay, that's a necessity. And also the connecting of being able to see the people in front of you, the rows being connected. Various opinions regarding that issue as well. The vast majority, as I said, the vast majority of our scholars do not see it to be permissible. Do not see it to be permissible that a person prays by themselves, or they pray following what's happening on TV or live broadcast or anything like that. I know certain modern scholars today have given the fatwa that it is okay, and with all due respect to them, no animosity, no disrespect for them. That is their opinion. May Allah reward them for their ijtihad. May Allah reward them for their, the work they have done and their knowledge. I disagree, but as I said, this should not, and look, this should not be an issue of hatred and animosity and arguments. Even if you're listening to me right now, you don't agree with me, no problem, right? This is not an issue that is an issue that there's no khilaf in, that somehow you're going against all of the scholars or a principle of the deen. It's not one of those issues. There is, as I said, some scholars did allow for it, and so somebody holds a different opinion, okay, that's fine. So it shouldn't be a problem, shouldn't be an issue that causes problems or hatred or animosity. But as I said, the vast majority of our scholars do not allow for it. And yes, this is an extenuating circumstance. I get that. And I believe that we should treat it as an extenuating circumstance in the sense that we understand that Allah has given us a unique challenge this Ramadan. That unique challenge is we have to pray taraweeh on our own, or we have to pray taraweeh with the members of our household, and that's it. This is a unique challenge that Allah has given to us, and like all unique challenges, there are unique blessings as well. So now a person who is struggling with the taraweeh because they don't have anything memorized, or the recitation is difficult for them to recite, subhanAllah, think about the blessing of them having added reward now, subhanAllah, for this difficulty that they're having. Think about the added reward of the person who has to pray taraweeh in their house, right? They're leading their, let's say the head of the household is leading their family in taraweeh. Look at the reward that in previous years they wouldn't be getting, now that they're getting. Think about the added blessing of completing the sunnah of the Prophet. What is the sunnah? By the way, some people don't understand this. The sunnah of the Prophet is to pray taraweeh in the masjid and also at home. The Prophet ﷺ, and we have a hadith, I believe, of Aisha radiallahu anha, mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, in which she tells us the story of the Prophet ﷺ, how Taraweeh started. She said the Prophet ﷺ came to the masjid in Ramadan, and he prayed Taraweeh, and people joined the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ prayed with them. And then it's happened for another night, and more people heard about it, more people came, they prayed Taraweeh with the Prophet ﷺ. And then the word spread, more people came. And then the Prophet ﷺ, one night, as the Prophet ﷺ heard that more and more people are gathering behind him for the Taraweeh prayer, the Prophet ﷺ prayed at home. And the people asked him, they said, why did you pray at home when you were coming to the masjid, praying Taraweeh in the masjid? The Prophet ﷺ said that, I understand that you are praying in the masjid, but I didn't want to continue to pray on the masjid so that some of you may take from that it's an obligation, that you have to pray in the masjid, right? And so to teach us that it is good to also pray in the house, Prophet prayed in the house as well. So what is the sunnah of Prophet? The sunnah is to pray in the masjid and also to pray in the house. So this year, finally, alhamdulillah, this is a blessing. I think it's a great blessing. Talk about forgotten sunnahs. I have a series on YouTube called Forgotten Sunnahs. This is a forgotten sunnah for Ramadan. To pray taraweeh in your house as well, right? That to not completely be reliant upon the masjid and say like, oh, if it's not going to happen in the masjid, it's not going to happen. SubhanAllah, sometimes our schedules, and this may have happened to you, sometimes our schedules don't allow us to pray taraweeh in the masjid. Maybe the masjid, I'm talking about outside of the coronavirus issue, the masjid maybe is 30 minutes away from your house. You drive 30 minutes there, you pray, you drive 30 minutes back, the person says, oh, I'm not going to be able to pray taraweeh today. I have work early in the morning. I don't have time. Maybe the nights are shorter. I won't get any sleep. So khalas, I'm not going to pray taraweeh. This is the attitude that has been developed for some people because they have this misconception that taraweeh can only be prayed in the masjid. And yet the sunnah of the Prophet is also to pray taraweeh at home. So for that person, even outside of the coronavirus, we would say, look, don't miss taraweeh. Yes, it's sunnah, it's not an obligation, right? Even if you miss taraweeh, you're not sinful for that, but it is recommended, right? But do not miss it because you can't go to the masjid, pray it at home. Because the Prophet ﷺ also prayed it at home, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So I'm going to leave it at that question. I'm over my 60-minute mark, alhamdulillah. Thank you to everyone who joined me. Alhamdulillah, everyone who gave salams. Thank you for giving me salams. And wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairah for being here. And like I said, I'm going to be doing more Q&As, most likely, and I haven't fully decided yet, most likely at the 10-day mark and the 20-day mark. So the 10-day mark, and then right before the last 10 nights of the month of Ramadan, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma balighna Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to witness the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to spend the month of Ramadan where our previous sins have been forgiven. Allahumma ameen. And also, as I mentioned earlier, if you have further questions, you can email. I'm going to post the email right now, inshallah ta'ala. I'm typing it right now. You can check it out. Bismillah. Questions. Ramadan questions. Sorry, it's a little bit of a long email. Questions at saadtasleem.com. Sent. Okay, Ramadan questions. So you can send your questions in there as well, and we can hopefully answer them in the next Q&A, inshallah ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.